gold is a constant ruler. And you can really see where things are if you measure it in gold, because paper money, they keep on creating it. So to say that, the dollar value of the GDP is this, or the dollar value of the stock market, means nothing, because the dollar's value is not fixed, right? The dollar can lose value.
StockPulse on location, Vancouver Resource Investment Conference 2020. I've got with me now Peter Schiff, Euro Pacific Capital, Schiff Gold. Peter, appreciate you spending some time here. I want to talk about the economy. How are you?
I'm much better than the economy.
Yeah. Well, you'd if you read the press clippings, you'd say that we had the best economy of all time. Well, how do you score that?
Well, you have to believe that. I mean, Trump is trumpeting that, right? That's his political line, because he wants to be reelected. So he wants to pretend that we have the greatest economy ever. Now, I think Wall Street has a vested interest in perpetrating that false narrative, because it helps get people to buy overpriced stocks, right? That's their business. They want people buying the market. So believing that the economy is great is one way to kind of justify these record high multiples. In fact, last year, corporate earnings actually declined slightly, yet the stock market was up about 30%. And so that shows you that it's more perception than reality. If we really had a booming economy, then corporations would be earning more money. But they're not. They're earning less. And so it's all just a figment of people's imaginations. But unfortunately, it's going to end very badly.
Did you ever envision a Dow 30,000?
Well, look, we're at 29,000 and change, so 30,000 is clearly within the realm of possibility. But look, it doesn't really matter if it goes to 30,000 or higher than 30,000, because it's only going there because it's a bubble, and bubbles always pop. So the key is how much lower is it going to go once it crashes. I'd say that at least a 50% decline, if not much more than that. So there's a lot of downside. And what is the Federal Reserve going to do to try to prevent the market from collapsing, or try to, build it back up after it collapses? And what is that going to do to the bond market? What is that going to do to the dollar? What is that going to do to the price of coal? These are the more important questions that investors should be asking.
Yeah, and I heard your speech in there a little bit ago. You talked about Trump being a most liberal Republican. I tend to agree with that. Talk about the deficit. What's going on here? Are we out of our minds?
Well, the deficit's just getting bigger and bigger. No one gives a damn. So no, we're going to have a debt crisis. We're going to have a sovereign debt crisis, which is much worse than like a subprime mortgage crisis, because there's no bailouts from a sovereign debt crisis. There's just the Fed, and then that causes a currency crisis. And so that's worse. And ultimately, a currency crisis is a sovereign debt crisis, because the sovereign debt is denominated in the currency that's in crisis. So we're headed for some really bad times, unfortunately.
So I always use the analogy of the dollar being basically Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's. They're holding it up. How long can they keep pumping the dollar full of juice there and get it going?
I don't know. That's the $64 trillion question.
And obviously, all roads lead to gold for you. Talk about how you see gold shaping up in 2020.
Yeah, no, there's probably some roads leading to silver, but but yeah, unfortunately, real money, real hard assets is where people are going to need to be to try to take refuge from this. I mean, people are going to be rushing to get rid of claims to wealth and actually have something tangible, something real. And that's gold. And I do think that central banks are going to be returning to gold. I think gold is going to be remonetized. I think that's the only way this thing can end.
What does that mean, remonetizing gold?
Well, meaning gold being the principal reserve asset for central banks. I don't think it means that people are going to walk around, handing each other gold coins, but central banks are going to have to hold gold to give value to their fiat currencies. So fiat currencies are going to have to return to legitimate currencies. Right, what gave currency value initially was the gold backing behind it. So people had confidence in the currency, not because it was just a piece of paper, but because the central banks had gold that backed it up. And I think we're going to go back to that. We've had dollars, right? The dollar has functioned as the primary reserve asset, but that system can't work because the dollar has nothing backing it up. So how do you back up something with something backed up by nothing? But this is what led to all these bubbles and these misallocations of resources and these huge disparities in income equality. None of this stuff is a byproduct of capitalism. Of course, there's going to be income inequality in capitalism, but a much more healthy type of inequality where everybody is getting better, everybody is benefiting, and the economy is legitimately growing. All we've really done now is create these financial bubbles to, paper over the fact that the actual economy has been weakening as a result of this policy.
Is that where the reset comes in, would you say? The gold could just get reset one day overnight to the dollar?
Yeah, well, if gold is going to be money again and not just jewelry, right? If it's going to be used as money, then that's a big increase in demand for gold. And that means gold's going to be repriced. But certainly if you look around, I mean, the price of gold compared to, let's say, other financial assets, the stock market, the global bond market, the real estate market, either everything has to crash or gold has to go way up to kind of return to something that's normal historically, because you can relate stock prices or real estate prices or the global GDP to gold, because gold is a constant ruler. And you can really see where things are if you measure it in gold, because paper money, they keep on creating it. So to say that the dollar value of the GDP is this or the dollar value of the stock market means nothing, because the dollar's value is not fixed, right? The dollar can lose value. And so if you measure stock prices in dollars of diminished value, of course the price is going to go up. But gold is fixed. Gold is a constant throughout time. And so you can really measure prices in terms of gold. And using gold to measure prices, it's clear that prices are ridiculously high, and so something is going to have to change. Either all the other prices come down, the price of gold goes up, or some combination of the two.
You mentioned silver. I'm a fan of silver, especially at these ratios. I got to believe that you favor silver.
That's another thing that seems mispriced, is silver seems dirt cheap, unless something has changed and it's different this time, and it usually isn't. The price of silver is going to gain a lot relative to the price of gold. But that's only going to happen in a bull market. I've never seen it happen in a bear market. So the only way that that gap is going to be closed is if the price of gold is going up, and it's already over 1,500. So gold's going to have to go way up in order for that gold-silver ratio to normalize.
Yeah. Are you? I know you're obviously here in this room here. A lot of equities around. Is that a way to play the market? I know Adrian Day's your guy working on that side of it.
Yeah, Adrian Day manages our gold fund. He's done a fantastic job. So I guess my credit is being smart enough to hire Adrian instead of doing it myself. But yeah, in fact, I was looking at the gold stocks. So far, this year in January, gold stocks are down, even though the price of gold is up. And the last time this happened in January, where you had a strong gold market and a weak gold stock market, was January of 2000, 20 years ago. And that was the bottom of a 20-year bear market in gold. That was the peak of the NASDAQ stock market bubble. And that's when you had this much negativity in the mining sector. So I think that's a good sign, because if you faded that, if you loaded up on gold stocks in January 2000 and sold, the U.S. stock market, particularly the NASDAQ, you made a killing, because the NASDAQ went down to 80% over 2 years, and gold began a 10-year bull market. Gold stocks were 10x. So this looks like that time to me. So this is a great time to be buying my gold fund. Euro Pacific Gold Fund is EPGFX is the symbol.
Yeah, you made another comment here. I want to get back in the political realm about Bernie having basically the primary rip from him. But it shows a lot of support for this. So with no cases of socialism really ever working and a Trump economy going so strong, where's the disconnect here?
Well, that's because the Trump economy isn't growing strong, right? It's just part of the myth. And I think the Sanders voters feel that, right, in their own lives. And a lot of, I think, the disgruntled Democrats who voted Trump don't feel that they're any better off now than they were when Trump was elected. So I think they may, unfortunately, be tempted by socialism. I mean, that's one thing that's constant. Socialism never works, but it never loses its appeal, no matter how many times it fails. People still want to have faith in it, right? They still want to believe this nonsense. And what generally happens is the socialists say that the people who tried it in the past just did it wrong, right? That's all. They weren't as well-meaning or as caring or as
believe
smart,
them?
whatever, Or they'll try to hold up other economies as being socialist, like Sweden or Norway, and not mention the fact that they were more prosperous before they turned towards socialism, and that more recently, over the last decade or more, they've been moving in the opposite direction. They're becoming less socialistic because of the problems that socialism created in those economies. A great example is New Zealand. I mean, New Zealand in the 80s was the poster child for socialist, the midway between capitalism and socialism, right? A nicer kind of capitalism with all that. And they bankrupted themselves. But now New Zealand has one of the most competitive economies in the world, and it's done really well because they rejected most of that. And they, took on more free market oriented reforms. So, the countries that have really went all in on socialism, those are the basket cases of the world, right? That's your Venezuelas, right? People are suffering. You take a prosperous economy and then you fall into this socialist trap, and yes, you create equality by destroying the wealth of everybody.
So 2020, a couple of predictions from you. What will this decade be about? How do you see it?
Well, this is going to be an inflationary decade. It's going to be a tough decade. I think it's going to be worse than the 70s. It'll probably be worse than the 30s as far as, what's going to happen economically. Politically, that could be the worst part of it. I mean, if this permanently shifts us to a socialist type economy, much more so than we have been in the past, that would be a real disaster. I mean, the one optimistic, note, I guess, is if things get so bad, if we don't reelect Trump and we do elect a Sanders or somebody, and things get so obviously worse over the next 4 years, that we can get a candidate that is charismatic enough and that can, maybe, strike a chord, a similar chord than the one Trump struck, but for really making America great again. I mean, really cutting government and having sound money and doing all the necessary things that can be done. I mean, maybe it could be a springboard to, some type of, a resurrection in America or mourning or something like that. But I don't know. That could just be the optimistic part of me thinking that we have that chance. I mean, we may have to be socialists for a generation or two. I don't know.
What advice would you give to the Trump White House as far as finance goes?
Well, I wish I could give advice to the Trump White House, but they wouldn't take it. In fact, I know some of the people who advise Trump, and it's unfortunate that he's getting such bad advice. In fact, a lot of these guys that would be very critical of Trump's policies if Trump were a Democrat are now talking about how great the policies are because he's a Republican. So go figure. Yeah.
Okay, always inspirational. Peter Schiff,
Right.
Schiff Gold. How do we follow you, Peter?
You can follow me on Twitter or Facebook, just Peter Schiff. Schiff Radio is my podcast, or on my YouTube channel, Schiff Report. Euro Pacific Capital is my broker-dealer. Europac.com is the URL. And yeah, Schiff Gold if you want to buy some physical gold and silver.
Okay.
All right.
Appreciate that, Peter Schiff. Thank you.